Hi everyone, this is calculator section of practice test number 1 from College Board exams. If you do need the non-calculator section, that is also posted, so feel free to refer to that as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive right into number 1. John runs at different speeds as part of his training program. The graph shows his target heart rate at different times during his workout. On which interval is the target rate strictly increasing, then decreasing? So it should be a straight upward curve or upward line and a straight downward line, right? And so we're going to look at the answer choices, beginning with between 0 and 30 minutes. So 0 and 30. We see an increase and a constant. So A is not the answer. Then we have 40 to 60. That is the strict increase and strict decrease. So B is the answer, but I'm going to continue to show you C and D. So C is 50 to 65. And in the purple, we see a strict decrease and a strict increase. And so that's why that's not the answer. And then D is 70 through 90. And we see an increase and a constant, which is why D is not the answer as well. Number 2, if y equals kx, where k is constant, and y equals 24 when x equals 6, what is the value of y when x equals 5? When it says k is a constant, all that means is that k is a number, and it is always the same number, right? And so now they have a scenario that they tell us y equals 24 and x equals 6. So I'm going to plug that into the equation because they give you a set of information that you know. So we have y, which is 24, equals k times 6. And once we divide both sides, we can conclude that k equals 4. So now we have an actual equation with the value of k, right? So instead of y equals kx, we can say y equals 4x. And the final question is, what is the value of y when x equals 5? So we're going to go ahead and plug that into here. We get y equals 4 times 5, which is equal to 20, C. Number 3. In the figure above, lines L and M are parallel and lines S and T are parallel. If the measure of angle 1 is 35 degrees, it wants you to find the measure of angle 2. So when we have two lines that are parallel and intersecting another set of parallel lines, a lot of the angle theorems or shortcuts that you might have learned during geometry class apply here. So basically, we can say that this 35 degrees also means this is 35 degrees. And as we know, a line adds up to 180 degrees. So then now we can conclude that this is 145 degrees. And basically, you should be able to recognize that if we were to use like corresponding angles, this circle here should replicate this circle here, which replicates here and here as well. So it applies to all 4 circles. And therefore, we can actually conclude that this angle 2 is 145 degrees, which is true for all of these angles here, which is why D is the answer. All right, number 4. If 16 plus 4x is 10 more than 14, what is the value of 8x? If you are having trouble with word problems, there are certain words that directly translate into mathematical figures, which is the most common example, this being the equal sign. So 16 plus 4x is 10 more than 14. So from 14, we're going to add 10. And we're going to go ahead and solve for x because it wants the value of 8 times x. So we're going to say 16 plus 4x equals 24, minus 16 on both sides. So we have 4x equals 8, divide by 4 on both sides, x equals 2, and then 8 times 2 is equal to 16. C. Okay, number 5. Which of the following graphs best show a strong negative association between D and T? So first determining what is a positive association and what is a negative association. So positive association is meaning when D increases, T increases, and when D decreases, T decreases. So the sign of both are moving the same direction. But when it comes to negative association, you can imagine it would be the opposite, meaning that when D increases, T decreases, and when D decreases, T increases. Okay, so they have opposite relationships, meaning that the positive association graph will look like this. This is positive. Because as x is increasing, y is also increasing, right? When it goes upward. And then a negative graph would look something like this. Because as x is increasing, y is actually decreasing. It's doing the opposite. So knowing that, we should be able to eliminate C right away because that's a positive. B is very scattered. It's not really a line. And so it's going to just be a pretty scattered, looks more like no correlation to me. And then we have A and D, which are both negative, but since D is closer to a line, and A is more scattered around, it asks for a strong negative association, which is why D is the answer. If it was a weak negative association, A would have been the answer because they're a little more further apart from the line of best fit for the negative association. Okay, number 6. It tells us 1 decagram is equal to 10 grams, 1,000 milligrams is equal to a gram, and it says that one type of medicine is in 2 decagram containers, and based on the information, how many 1 milligram doses are there in two decagram container? So believe it or not, this happens to be a trick question, and it's because like they try to confuse you with the containers and the doses, and they try to make you figure out and like confuse you which way does it really go, like where am I supposed to multiply, where am I supposed to divide. But once you recognize that they're trying to trick you in that sense, it should become super easy, because all it's saying is that this hospital stores in a medicine that is stores it in a container that is 2 decagrams, right? But we want to know how many 1 milligram fits in 2 decagrams. So the question is 2 decagrams equals how many milligrams? This is basically the question, but they made it confusing, right? So all we have to figure out or convert is how much does 2 decagrams equal in milligrams. So given this information, the first thing that I would do with this is that if 1 decagram is 10 grams, I would think, okay, how many grams is in 2 decagrams? So we have 2 decagrams is then equal to 20 grams. And then now we do have the conversion of grams to milligrams, which is our final unit that we need, which is milligrams, right? So the final question is, in 20 grams, how many milligrams are there, right? So this is the same thing as saying in 2 decagrams, how many milligrams are there? Okay, and in order to solve this, what I'm going to set up is basically it tells us 1 gram is equal to 1,000 milligrams. So to find 20 grams, it's multiplied by 20. I'm going to do the same thing and multiply by 20, and I'm able to solve that question mark is equal to 20,000 milligrams. Which brings us to answer choice D. All right, number 7. The number of rooftops with solar panel installations in 5 cities is shown in the graph above. If the total number of installations is 27,500, what is the appropriate label for the vertical axis of the graph? You'll notice A, B, C, D all say number of installations. We're basically figuring out what unit is it, right? So what I'm going to do and figure out how many installations are shown on the graph. So we have 9 here, 5 here, we have 6 here, we have 4 here, and we have 3.5 here. And when we add all these numbers up, we get 27.5 installations. Obviously, this doesn't represent how many installations there are. It says the total number of installations is 27,500. So in order to represent that, what does the unit have to be, right? And from 27.5 to 27,500, I'm going to move over the decimal 1, 2, 3 times and add the 2 zeros, right? So I moved the decimal over 3 times. In other words, I'm going to multiply this by 1,000 in order to get to 27,500. So 27.5 times 1,000 is equal to 27,500. Therefore, I can conclude that the vertical axis should be a number of installation in thousands, C. All right, number 8. For what value of n is absolute value of n minus 1 plus 1 equal to 0? The equation is, we're in as is. This is a trick question, but let's just solve it like we would solve an absolute value equation. So we get absolute value of n minus 1 equals -1. What people will do is continue to solve for this and say set up equations such as n minus 1 equals -1, n minus 1 equals 1. And it makes no sense because at this point you should immediately recognize this value from the absolute value cannot come out whatsoever and become a negative value because it's an absolute value. Therefore, the answer is D. There is no such value of n. A question that I see commonly answered wrong. Okay, number 9. All right, we have the speed of a sound wave in air depends on air temperature. A is the speed of a sound wave in feet per second, and T is the air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Which of the following expresses the air temperature in terms of the speed of a sound wave? So these questions, you could be figuring out, okay, what is air temperature? What is speed of a sound wave? But if you look at the answer choices, it should be simply put, it's asking for what is T equal to, given the equation, right? So I'm going to take this equation and solve for T. That's all I'm doing. So we should be able to subtract 1052. So we get A minus 1052 is equal to 1.08 T. And to solve for T, we're going to divide. And this is what T is equal to. Okay, so this one should be a simple question. No need to even think it through. A is the answer choice here. And then the next question is kind of a follow-up where you do have to think about it. So at which of the following air temperatures will the speed of a sound wave be closest to 1,000 feet per second? So you have to break this down. So air temperature is equal to T. Speed of a sound wave is S. So it's telling us S is closest to 1,000 feet per second. So in other words, S is equal to 1,000. And then I need to solve for T, right? And so we're going to go ahead and solve for this. You can use the equation from before. You can use this same equation. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm going to plug it in. I apologize. This should be, speed of a sound wave should be A. This is a big thing that happens actually. Sometimes they usually try not to confuse you with like the variable they use with like what they're representing, but I don't know why I thought it was S for speed. So A is the speed of a sound wave. So we're going to plug this in. 1,000 is equal to 1,052 plus 1.08 T. And when we subtract 1,052, we get -52 is equal to 1.08 T. Divide. And this, when you punch it in the calculator, T equals -48.15, which is closest to answer choice B. All right, number 11. Which of the following numbers is not a solution of the inequality? So let's go ahead and solve the inequality first. So I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides and add 3 on both sides. So we get -2 is greater than equal to x. And I'm going to flip it just for the sake of understanding this better. So x is less than equal to -2. And the only answer choice that does not fall into this inequality is A, because all the other numbers are less than or equal to -2. All right. Number 2. number 12. Based on the histogram above of the following, which is closest to the average number of seeds per apple? So as soon as I see this, I should understand it's total number of seeds divided by number of apples. That's how to calculate the average of how many seeds there are per apple, right? So I'm going to go ahead, 12, they already tell you here, 12 apples. So that's the denominator, and we just need to solve for the numerator, which is going to go ahead and once you interpret this graph, it's the number of apples times the number of seeds added by the number of apples times number of seeds, so forth, right? So in the first bar, we have two apples that have 3 seeds, right? So 3 seeds for 2 apples plus 5 seeds for 4 apples plus 6 seeds for 1 apple, which is just 6. And we have 7 seeds for 2 apples, and we have 9 seeds for 3 apples. So 3 times 2 plus 5 times 4 plus 6 plus 7 times 2 plus 5 times 3, when calculated, is 73 divided by 12, which we get 6.08, which is closest to answer choice C. All right, moving on to number 13. A group of 10th grade students responded to a survey. Which of the following categories accounts for approximately 19% of all the survey respondents? So immediately I recognize I just have to go through A, B, C, D and figure out which is closest to 19%. So in this case, we have females taking geometry. So how many females are there taking geometry? 53. So we get 53 divided by 310. Females taking algebra 2, so 62 divided by 310. Male is taking geometry, we have 59 divided by 310. And then we have male is taking algebra 1, which is 44 divided by 310. And we're going to see which one is closest to 19%. And when you punch these all into the calculator, the answer will be C. All right, number 14. So we have a table of a random sample of 21 brown bullhead fish. The outlier measurement is 24 inches is an error. Of the mean, median, and range of the values listed, which will change the most if the 24-inch measurement is removed from the data? So we're going to have to figure out what is the mean, median, and range, including the 24 inches. And then when we remove it, because it's an error, we want to see the difference of how these 3 measurements change. So let's begin with mean. So we add up all the numbers, so 8 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 10 plus 10. So if you know how to use the calculator well, there's actually a place where you can fill in all the data and then click and it'll give you the mean, median, and range. So go for it if you know how to use that. I'm going to be solving the entire calculator section without a calculator to show you that it's possible without it as well, in case you don't know those quick functions on the TI calculator. So for the mean, you're going to add all the numbers up and divide it by 21. So when you add all of it up, it's 262 divided by 21. And then we want to see what happens if we get rid of the 24. So now we have 262 minus that 24 we're getting rid of, divided by 20. So now we have 20 fishes that we have to divide by instead of 21. And you'll realize that this is basically from 12.48 to 11.9. Okay, so it changed by like approximately 0.58. All right, moving on to median. So for median, I'm going to cross out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then median is originally 12. And we're going to see what it changes to using blue. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we have two values left, the 12s. And if you average those two, you still get 12. So the median is unchanged. And finally, we're going to take a look at the range. So the largest number minus the smallest number. So originally it's 24 minus 8. However, with the 24 disappearing, it changes to 16 minus 8. So this is originally 16, but it changes to 8. So the difference here is minus 8, right? And so from the three measurements, we see that the range changes most drastically. You can do all these calculations, but if you know mean, median, and range well enough, you should be able to immediately analyze that because the outlier of 24 is going to make a huge impact on the range, especially because there's a good amount of numbers. The mean and median are not going to be drastically affected, right? So C is the answer here. All right, let's move on to number 15. All right. The graph above displays the total cost C in dollars of renting a boat for H hours. What does the C intercept represent in the graph? As I always like doing, I will always take the slope intercept form with something, basically a frame that I kind of already am used to. And they try to switch it up, right? So I'm going to shove it back into this frame that I already know well about. And so I can recognize that Y is C in this case. And the X is H in this case, right? So you can take a look at that. And basically, when it says it's asking for the C-intercept, I can always also say it is basically asking for the Y-intercept, right? And what is Y-intercept? Y-intercept is Y value when X is equal to 0. So I'm going to apply the same thing except change the variables for this specific question. So it's going to be the C value when H is equal to 0. And what does H represent? It's the number of hours that the boat has been rented, right? So it's asking what is the total cost when the boat has not been rented yet, basically, right? And so if you look at the answer choices, B, C, these both talk about number of boats, number of hours. That's not what I see intercepted. The Y value should be a dollar amount, right? So immediately I cross out B and C. Then I look at D, the increase in cost to rent the boat for each additional hour. This is actually slope. So if you looked at my non-calculator version of this exam, we cover this. This is the change in Y over the change in X. In this case, it's asking for the change in dollars over the change in hours spent on the boat, right? So this is slope, and A is going to be our C-intercept or Y-intercept, which is why it's our answer. All right, number 16. Which of the following represents the relationship between H and C? Again, this is just a simple Y equals mx plus b question, but this indeed is a trick question because everyone immediately goes, okay, the Y-intercept is 5, very easy. And then I'm going to count up and they'll be like 1, 2, 3, rise over 1, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 3/4 is a slope. And this is exactly how they fall into the trap. Because attention to detail is something that they also really care about. You'll notice that the units are different for the hours versus the dollars. And so in reality, the rise is 3, but the run is only 1, right? The difference between the two points each time is only an interval of 1. So the slope is actually 3 over 1, which is ym is equal to 3. And our equation should be not y, it should be c, sorry. C is equal to 3h plus 5, which is why C is the answer and B is the trap question here, or trap answer choice here. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to number 17. The complete graph of the function f is shown in the xy plane above. For what value of x is the value of f of x at its minimum? So f of x, as it tells you here, is the y value. and it says, for what value of x is the value of f of x at its minimum? So it tells us that the f of x is at its minimum. And we have to recognize where is the point where y is the lowest. And it's right here because it's the lowest point on our graph. And it's asking us what is the value of x when it is the lowest at its minimum. And the x value for here is -3, right? Because this portion here, x equals -3, which is why B is the answer here. Okay. Let's move on to number 18. In the xy plane, if 0, 0 is a solution to the system of inequalities above, which of the following relationships between A and B must be true? So it already told us 0, 0 is a solution, the origin. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in to see if it benefits us in any way. So we get the first inequality as 0 is less than 0 plus A. And the second inequality as 0 is greater than 0 plus B. And I'm going to simplify these inequalities, basically meaning that 0 is less than A, or A is greater than 0. And the other part is that 0 is greater than B, or B is less than 0. So these are our two pieces of information. And based on this, basically it's saying A will be a positive value, B will be a negative value. Knowing this, which of these answer choices have to be true? And it's going to be A. A positive value will always be greater than a negative value, which is why A is the answer here. All right, number 19. A food truck sells salads for $6.50 each and drinks for $2 each. The revenue for selling a total of 209 salads and drinks in one day was $836.50. How many salads were sold that day? So I'm going to immediately say S is the number of salads. And D is going to be the number of drinks sold. So we're going to set up a system of equations and then figure out what is S, because that's what they're looking for, right? So the first equation that I'm going to set up is a total of 209 salads and drinks. So S plus D is equal to 209. And the second portion is going to be the dollar, or the revenue. So 6.50 S plus 2D is equal to 836.50. Okay, in this case, you could always do substitution, you could always do elimination. It doesn't matter which method you use, you should be getting the same answer. This time I'm going to use substitution just because the first equation is pretty simple. So I'm going to take this and basically solve for D, which is D equals 209 minus S, and plug it into our second equation here. And we're going to solve 6.50S plus 2 times 209 minus S is equal to 836.50. And when we further solve this, so 6.5S plus 418 minus 2S is equal to 836.5. Subtract 418 on both sides and simplify the left-hand side. So we have 4.5S is equal to 418.5, and divide this further for our final answer in order to solve for S, which is 93B. All right, and the reason why I basically solved for D equals when I originally chose the substitution instead of S equals is because I'm solving for S. So to have the foresight to know that since I'm solving for S, finding the D equals value and plugging it in would be easier, because that means we have this S value remaining, right? We would be able to figure out S instead of having to plug it back into the equation after solving for D and then solving for S again afterwards. All right, 20, Alma bought a laptop computer at a store that gave a 20% discount off its original price. The total amount she paid to the cashier was P dollars, including an 8% sales tax on the discounted price. Which of the following represents the original price of the computer in terms of P? This is also a question that I typically see many people get wrong. So as long as you can solve it out, write out in equation form what the question is asking, it should be pretty simple. So we are able to get the total amount she paid to the cashier was P dollars. So after all the operation is done, she's going to pay the cashier P dollars. So P is going to equal, let's say, the original price of the computer multiplied by, since it's a 20% discount, it's going to be multiplied by 0.8. Okay, so this is a concept that you really have to understand for discounting or percentages for the SAT. So basically, if something is, a shirt is $10 and it's 10% off, you should not be doing $10 times 0.1 and then subtract that from $10, okay? Instead, you should immediately recognize I can multiply $10 by 0.9 and solve for the new cost of this shirt, right? So it's going to be, equation is basically 1 minus the discount. Discount is a percentage, right? And when you multiply it by 1 minus the discount percentage, you get the percent you can multiply it by to immediately get the actual price. So if we have the original price of the laptop computer and it's 20% off, we can multiply by 0.8 and it will give our new value, right? And then the last part we need is an 8% sales tax on the discounted price. So this is the discounted price right here. And it's asking for us to account for the 8% sales tax. So it's an 8% of the discounted price being added. So it's the opposite operation here. So we get 1.08, right? Same concept as the discount, except it's 1 plus sales tax. So this is going to become an very useful for questions such as interest rate or bank account questions that we see often in the SAT as well. So it's going to ask which of the following represents the original price of the computer in terms of P. So we have P, we have the original price. So we're going to act as if original price is a variable and solve for it. And to do that, all you have to do is divide by the 0.8 and the 1.08. So the original price is equal to P divided by 0.8 and 1.08, which is answer choice D. All right, so once you can solve for this from word equation to an actual equation, the math part of it is not hard at all. All right, moving on to number 21. So we have a graph. All the information. I'm going to go to the very last part of the question. So if a person is chosen at random from those who recalled at least one dream, what is the probability that the person belonged to group Y? So questions like these where you're finding the probability, it's always easiest to find the denominator first. So where am I searching for these group of people? So it's going to be from those who recalled at least one dream. So number of people who recalled at least one dream. So let's solve for this first. How many people recalled at least one dream? And it's going to be the 39 and the 125, right? So this bottom denominator is going to be represented by 39 plus 125. Okay, and then the top portion is going to be from these people, what is the probability that the person belonged to group Y? So it's going to be person in group Y, or the number of people in group Y that dreamt or is dreaming greater than one dream, greater than equal to one dream, right? Dreaming or recalled. So from the number of people who recalled at least one dream, it's asking how many were group Y. And so now we're going to find here, this is group Y, this is group Y, right? Both are group Y who dreamt or recalled at least one dream. So the top numerator is now 11 plus 68, and they're going to be a part of the 39 plus 125, right? And so when we solve for this, we should get 79 over 164, which is why C is our answer here. Okay. Number 22. We have a large table and it asks for the best approximation of the average rate of change in annual budget for agriculture natural resources in Kansas from 2008 to 2010. Average rate of change is basically slope. So all I'm going to find is the annual budget for agriculture and natural resources in 2010 subtracted by the budget in 2008 divided by the time that passed, which is 2 years, right? And so when we look for it, we find 488,106 and 358,708. So this should be a simple setup. 488,106 minus 358,708 divided by 2. And we get 64,699-ish, which if you notice, this number is in thousands of dollars, so you should add 3 zeros to there. So when you add 3 zeros, that's closest to answer choice B. Okay, number 23. Of the following, which program's ratio of its 2007 budget to its 2010 budget is closest to the human resource program's ratio of 2007 to 2010? So we're going to we first have to find the ratio of 2007 to 2010 for the human resource program, right? So we have 2007 here, 2010. I don't like punching in all these numbers personally, so I like to simplify it. So I will do like 4.05 divided by 5.92 to do the ratio for human resources, and I get 0.68. So what I'm going to do is do the same thing for all 4 of these categories and see which one is closest to the 0.68. And for this, I'm going to get 3.73 divided by 4.88. If it makes you feel better, feel free to put in the entire number. I like simplifying things to save time. So I get 0.76, then I get 2.16 divided by 3.01, 0.72. We get 1.47 divided by 1.77. We get 0.83. We get 2.63 divided by 4.64, which is 0.57. So this is really a time game. This is a question of how quickly can you analyze 2007, 2010, find the appropriate category and solve for the ratio. And B is closest, education is closest to the human resources budget ratio from 2007 to 2010. All right, number 24. Which of the following is an equation of a circle in the xy plane with center 0, 4 and a radius with endpoint 4 over 3 divided by 5? So first things first, you should know the equation of a circle. So the circle equation is x squared plus y squared equals r squared. But the second important equation that you need to know or memorize for circle especially would be the distance formula. So we're going to go ahead and use the distance formula, and this is all because we want to find the radius. So d is equal to x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, which is equal to, and I'm just plugging in the numbers that they gave us. 4/3 minus 0 squared plus 5 minus 4 squared equal to 16 over 9 plus 1 is equal to 25 over 9, which is 5 over 3. So this is going to be our radius. And if you know our circle equation, you should be able to solve for this. This is radius, and we know r squared is on the right-hand side, and the r squared is 25 over 9. So we need to look for a value where 25 over 9 is on our right-hand side. We have A, answer choice A, and B left over. And from these two, we find, it tells us that the center is 0, 4, which is why A is going to be the answer choice. If the center was 0, -4, then B would be our answer choice. So for the equation of a circle, it would be the opposite or inverse value, right? for the y. All right, number 25, we have an equation h equals negative 4.9 t squared plus 25t, and it tells us that h is the meters of a ball when it's t seconds after it's launched, with an initial velocity of 25 meters per second. After approximately how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? So when does the ball hit the ground? When the height is 0, right? The ball hits the ground when h equals 0. Okay, so that's the first part you need to recognize, that when it's ball hits the ground, it's h equals 0. So I'm going to plug that in. So 0 equals negative 4.9 t squared plus 25t. It is really easy to use a TI calculator again for this and trace where are the values. Feel free to do that once again if you know how to do it, but I'm going to solve it without a TI calculator to trace the zeros. And so I'm going to simplify this further to get negative. I'm going to take out negative 4.9t, and I get t. And then in order to solve this, don't think about it too complicated. It's basically just the 25 divided by the negative 4.9. So it's negative 25 divided by 4.9 t. And when I further solve this in the calculator, I should get 5.1. So it's basically means, sorry, the t, it should not be there anymore since I factored it out right here. And so we have t minus 5.1. So 0 equals negative 4.9t, t minus 5.1, which this is t equals 0 because it was launched from the floor. So yes, it was at the floor when it was initially thrown, but also when it goes up and then it comes back down, it hits the ball, or it hits the ground. The ball hits the ground again when t equals 5.1 seconds. Which is why D is our answer choice here. All right, number 26. So I'm going to skip all the not important part and go straight to type A trees produce 20% more pears than type B trees did. If type A trees produce 144 pears, how many pears did the type B trees produce? So you'll slowly get the eye for how to quickly pinpoint which part of the information or of the question is actually important. But using the equation we sort of covered earlier, type A trees produces another equal sign here. 20% more pears than type trees B trees did. So 1.2b. Okay, so this is a concept that confuses many people, so be wary. So when I read it, type A trees produce 20% more pears than type B trees did. It's pretty simple, right? Type A is more. So a lot of people are like, shouldn't I put the 1.2 on type A since it's more? But if you want to think about it like a balance, like a weight, you want to attach that 1.2 to the weaker side, right? So that it can balance, right? So that they're equal to each other. And if you think about it that way, it might help you that type A is equal to 1.2 times B because A is like a greater amount. Okay. There are a lot of questions that are involving this concept, so we'll further go through these. But for now, understand that, for example, if I had double the amount of gummy bears than gummy worms, right, then I have to do the 2 times the gummy worms to make up for the amount that they don't have. Okay. Anyway, so this is the equation. They tell us that type A trees produce 144 pears. So this is a simple plug and solve question. So divide by 1.2, and I get B is equal to 120. B. All right. 27. A square field measures 10 meters by 10 meters. So to me, I think 100 meters squared. 10 students each mark off a randomly selected region of the field. Each region is a square and has a side length of 1 meter. So this is 1 meter squared. And two regions overlap. The students counted the center earthworms contained in the soil to a depth of 5 centimeters. beneath the ground surface. Here are the results. Which of the following is a reasonable approximation of the number of earthworms to a depth of 5 centimeters beneath the ground surface in the entire field? So the sample that they collected is a depth of 5 centimeters. So we don't really have to worry about like multiplying by 5 or anything like that, because the sample that they collected was a depth of 5 centimeters. Now, all we have to realize is this is 1 meter squared, this is 1 meter squared, this is 1 meter squared. So I'm going to approximate this, and I can conclude with all collectively 10 students, they covered a surface area of 10 meters squared, right? And the number of earthworms that they collected is approximately 1,500 worms. So if in 10 meters squared we had 1,500 worms, it's asking in 100 meters squared, what can we estimate the number of worms to be? And it's just going to be, since 10 meters squared to 100 meters squared is times 10, I can take 1,500 worms and multiply by 10 to get 15,000. C. And a lot of the interpretation of this question is the reason why people will get this question wrong. So I would look into this one over and over again if necessary. Moving on to number 28, we have a system of inequalities, and which of the quadrant contains no solution. So I'm going to draw this out really quickly. So y is greater than equal to x plus 1. And then we have y is greater than 1/2 x minus 1. And so where we see this overlap is, yes, the orange solution reaches quadrant 4, but the black solution never reaches quadrant 4. And we want to see which surface area is basically overlapped by the two inequalities, which is why our answer is quadrant 4, since that's where there is no solution set for both overlaps of the inequalities. Number 29, for a polynomial px, the value of p3 is -2. Which of the following must be true about px? So this is essentially saying that when x equals 3, y is equal to -2. So believe it or not, it's not very helpful to our equation, but I will give my quick way of answering this, but I want you to give this question a good thought as well, because a lot of people don't know how to interpret this correctly. If I look at answer choice A, x minus 5 is a factor of px, that means that p of 5 is equal to 0. When I look at x minus 2 as a factor of p of x, p of 2 is equal to 0, p of -2 is equal to 0. Okay. So this information that they gave us is that p of 3 is equal to -2. We can't conclude that there's a factor that comes out of this. If anything, if it said like p of 3 is equal to 0, that means that x minus 3 is a factor of p of x, right? But ABC tells us nothing. Like, we aren't given any information about to determine whether something is a factor or not. So D is actually the answer. If you want to go to the fundamentals of this, if you divide this, so p of 3, this is x equals 3, so it's basically saying when it divides by x minus 3, this is the remainder, -2. So I would go look into this, but the easy way of answering is that the information that they give does not let us conclude that there is a factor of p of x that we know about. Okay, number 30. Which of the following is an equivalent form of the equation? So they gave us the equation here, actually. The only thing that you have to be careful about is it says that the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants. The coordinate of vertex A is 1, -16. When it says that something is identified as constants in the equation, that means you can immediately conclude what the vertex is based on the equations. And without even solving for this equation, to be honest, D should be the answer choice because you can immediately recognize from the equation that x is equal to 1 here and that y equals -16. It's identified as constants. It's right there in the equation for us to identify, basically. All right. Number 31. Wyatt can husk at least 12 dozen ears of corns per hour and at most 18 dozen ears of corn per hour. Based on the information, what is a possible amount of time in hours that it could take for Wyatt to husk 72 dozen ears of corn? So it could take 72 dozens divided by 12 per hour. So it could take 6 hours. And then it could also take 4 hours. Okay, very simple question. The answer can be 4, it can be 5, it can be 6, right? Any value between 4 and 6 inclusive would be the answer to this question. Okay. Number 32, the weight limit is 6,000 pounds. There's X identical boxes, each weighing 14 pounds. Its combined weight of the empty delivery truck and its driver is 4,500 pounds. What is the maximum possible value for X that will keep the combined weight of the truck driver and boxes below the bridge's posted weight limit? So it might seem complicated, but basically we know the weight of the truck empty and the driver is equal to 4,500. So basically the truck and the driver plus the weight of the boxes needs to be less than equal to 6,000. So as long as you understand that the weight of the boxes is 14 pounds times a number, which is X, this is a simple inequality question. So we get 14X. So let's subtract 4,500 on both sides. Is less than equal to 1,500. And once we divide this, we get X is less than equal to 107.14. So the maximum possible value for X, the number of boxes that we can carry, it can't be a decimal point, right? It would be 107. So rounded down from the answer choice that we got. Moving on to 33. According to the line graph above, the number of portable media players sold in 2008 is what fraction of the number sold in 2011? So number sold in 2008 divided by number sold in 2011. And we simply get 2008, 2011. So we have 100 and 160. So we have 100 over 160. A reminder that you do only get 4 slots, and also for fractions, it has to be the most simplified version, which is 5 over 8 in this case, which is our answer. 34, a local television station sells time slots for programs in 30-minute intervals. The station operates for 24 hours per day, every day of the week. What is the total number of 30-minute time slots the station can sell for Tuesday and Wednesday? So Tuesday and Wednesday, they're open all 24 hours, right? So a total of 24 and 24. So we have 48 hours. And we want to know how many 30-minute intervals fit in there, right? Or time slots, right? And so we know that every hour we get 2 30-minute intervals or time slots. So it's simply 48 times 2, which gets us 96 slots. All right, moving on to number 35. We have a cylinder silo, and it says that the volume is 72 pi cubic yards, and it wants to find the diameter. So firstly, you have to find the volume formula, or you should have it memorized, pi r squared times h. And it tells us that the volume is 72 pi, so I'm going to plug that in. And when I simplify by dividing by pi on both sides, we basically get 72 is equal to r squared times h. They did give us our h, or our height value, which is 8. So 72 is equal to r squared times 8. So I'm going to divide that on both sides to get that r squared is equal to 9. In other words, r is equal to 3. But don't stop there because it asks for the diameter. So we multiply that by 2 and solve for our diameter, which is d equals 6. All right, 36. For what value of x is the function h above undefined? So for a fraction or a function that looks like a fraction, you have to know that it is undefined when the denominator is equal to 0. So like when it's 1 over 0 or 5 over 0 or 8 over 0, that's when it's undefined. So you have to know that first and then solve for the denominator x minus 5 squared plus 4 times x minus 5 plus 4 to equal to 0. So I'm going to multiply this out, the x minus 5, and I'm going to get x squared minus 10x plus 25, and I'm going to distribute the 4, so I get 4x minus 20 plus 4 equals 0. I'm going to simplify this further, so we have x squared. Then we have negative 10x plus 4x, which is negative 6x. And then we have 25 minus 20 plus 4, which is just positive 9, is equal to 0. And when we factor this, x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. We can solve for the x value at which this function is undefined, which is x equals 3. All right. Number 37, Jessica opened a bank account that earns 2% interest compounded annually, meaning that every year you just get a 2% interest every time. Her initial deposit was $100, and she uses the expression 100 times x to the t power to find the value of the account after t years. What is the value of x in the expression? If you paid attention earlier, this should be very, very simple. $100 is the amount of money that she originally put. She should be multiplying it by how much it grows, right? So it's 1 plus this interest rate, which in this case is 2%, right? So I'm going to simplify this as 100 times 1.02 to the t power. So if it's 1 year, it's going to be 100 times 1.02. If it's 2 years, it's going to be 100 times 1.02 times 1.02 again, right? But basically it's asking for this x value, and it's going to be 1.02. So 1 plus the interest rate. If it said like you lose 10%, for example, I don't know why you would lose money when you put it in the bank account. You would say $100 times 0.9. Okay, if you're losing 10%, but this is interest rate that you're getting, so it's going to be added to the 1. All right, 38. Jessica's friend Tyshawn found an account that earns 2.5% interest compounded annually. Tyshawn made an initial deposit of $100, same time that Jessica did $100. After 10 years, how much more money will Tyshawn have? Obviously, Tyshawn's interest rate is greater than Jessica's interest rate, so we can expect that to be a greater amount, but we want to see the value that's different. So we're going to go ahead and figure out Tyshawn's value, which is 100 multiplied by 1.025 to the 10th power, and Jessica, which is 100 multiplied by 1.02 to the 10th power. And we're going to find the difference, 128.008 and 121.899. And when you subtract these two, we get our difference, which is $6.11. So that is the end of the calculator section. Feel free to ask any questions. I will cover not only the other official College Board exams, but also the real exams, the past exams, recent exams. I will also cover and upload. So if it was helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe for the future videos. Thank you.